Here we go. Woo. Almost had some last second. Let me take this echo off in my ears. Almost had some last second technical issues. I was able to work it out in enough time. That's the beauty about having an intro, because the beauty about having an intro is you're able to any last seconds. If you don't get a chance to test any last seconds, you could actually quickly troubleshoot and put it together, especially if you know the system. But we welcome you again to another afternoon. You know what I'm saying? It's time to switch gears. Welcome you to another afternoon of World of Akiba Land Roots and Culture African History class. Welcome you to another World of Akiba Land Roots and Culture African History class. Now, of course, World of Akiba Land is our community's youth group. However, I need you to know that this is beyond age limits. Okay, the young and the old, the middle aged, beyond age limits. So anybody can come, sit here, and enjoy the experience of traveling through time through the Zamani. If y'all are part of African spirituality class, you know what the Zamani is. Travel through the Zamani and take part in understanding who we were in God in terms of how we saw our eyes, how we developed societies, communities, empires, how we blessed the world with information, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, religion, art, sciences, you name it, it all came from us. And this is where we begin to take a look at that. So, if you're watching us on Facebook, I ask you to always please like, comment, and share. Those three things allow us to move this forward to a greater community. We live in a time where we can interact with each other beyond borders, beyond the country, beyond we could these are our Marcus Garvey days. We got to focus on using it for the sake of having that Marcus Garvey moment, that UNIA moment where black people all over come together under one umbrella, and World of Akiba seeks to be a part, a vehicle for that. So if you're also watching us on YouTube, please up, click subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you could always be here when we are doing our lessons. Why? Because we are always teaching something here at the World of Akiba Land. We're always delivering something. I got, again, this is Black History Month. Welcome here. Black History Month. And I promised myself I was going to produce another class for the sake of giving honor to my ancestors. To our ancestors, I'm going to produce something else this month. Yes. So before the month is out, we're going to make sure that we put forth a grand effort to get another experience for our community. But if you're watching again, we have tons and tons of we programs that you can partake in, which is Sunday at noon. We have a Akiba Land Inspirational Sunday. Again, you know, we ask that adults sit with the children, communicate with the children. If you have questions, you can hit me up and dialogue, and we can have questions with the children. If things go well, as things will do, we will set up a scenario where we can sit in class with me giving the instructions and them giving the lessons, you know, on that side of y'all sitting on that side of the screen. Yeah, that side right there, right? We have the African Speaks on Tuesday night at 7, which is, again, that's more of a teenager, young adult conversation, right? A teenager. Now, if you want the kids to sit down and you want to, you know, break it down to them, most of the time, some of these subjects and topics are discussed in the Akiba Land Inspirational Sunday that breaks it down a little bit more for a younger mind to be able to grasp around to. But we always ask the families to participate and create community family dialogue behind this. We have to know what our children are thinking. And how they are processing information. That's deeply important. We have Afro Stream, which is the news from a Pan-African perspective. We take the hot topics of the diaspora and give it to you in a Pan-African perspective, and that's all around the globe. Hopefully, y'all were looking at it last week. We talked about not Zimbabwe, but Rwanda. Yes, and we're gonna do another one on Rwanda too. We're gonna, you know, give a complete area. There was a video, a couple of videos that I didn't get a chance to go through for the Rwanda one. So make sure that y'all tune in for that. And then, of course, we have African history, which we are in now at 1 o'clock on Saturdays, and African spirituality, which comes right after. So we want to make sure that you always partake in that. Why? Because we are focusing on the rise of the African. Yes, we are. We are focused on the rise of the African, which is a connection between black people the world over. We're trying to create a connection between black people the world over. Okay, and if we can do that, we can change, we can deal with all aspects of our lives. Worlds of Akibaland, visit us on worldsofakibaland.org, WOAATL.org. If you seek to donate, participate, or whatever, it can all happen there. We're going to be doing more social media marketing to get this out. I want to let you know that this class was community charged. That's what I say. It was community charged. I was asked to put this particular class together because I had the resources and the know-how to actually bring the classes together. So I am not the expert. I am the Malakio. In our community, in any community, you can look it up. The words I am is the most two powerful words in the dictionary. I am the Malakio. I am the seeker of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And I seek that information and I seek to share it with you. I am that. I am. So, we were given what is called the People's Library. Let me see if I can get that up. The People's Library, which is 6 terabytes of data, People's Library, and it has tons and tons of African hit. You can click in any one of them and just keep drilling down. And if you just keep drilling down, and you'll see tons and tons of data, information, in terms of African history, and so that it's all here. 6 terabytes of information. That's just that one folder. And then we have tons of information that goes out, and so we have individuals in the community by the name of Walamu Olatunji. He is the master teacher when it comes to African history. Put it all together, and so when he put it all together, he said, "Brother, here you go. Go ahead and be fruitful and multiply." Wow. So understanding the word being fruitful and multiply means more than just having kids. It means birthing ideas, concepts, and understandings in the minds of everybody and allowing those individuals to bless others with the information that we have. So as we move forward in African history, the key part of understanding African history is self-awareness, self-realization, moving towards self-determination. Yes, that's what I call an Afrocation. Not an education, but an Afrocation. Why? Because we need to have an African perspective in the things that we learn. And it should move us to experience two things in our lives: an understanding of who we are and how we exist in this system of systematic oppression and racism, and who God has called us to be. It should move us towards a stance towards self-determination. Because anytime you have somebody always teaching you wrong information to lead you to somebody that you're not supposed to be, yeah, that's a problem. So we want to understand that. Now, we talk about the culture that ancient Africa had. That was key. The culture that we had, that allowed us to be the first, not only the first family of humanity, because by grand design we are the first family. By DNA makeup we are the first family. But we were able to contribute because they won't have you know that civilizations fashioned themselves after us. Period. Civilizations fashioned themselves after the great empires of African culture and spirituality, culture and civilization. And so we had key civilizations. And so one of the things that I want to, and every time I start studying and I start reading African history, I always realize what God did for the blessing of African people. He gifted us with the Nile River. So civilization being the complex society of 5 major characteristics: advanced cities, specialized workers, complex institutions, recording, and advanced technologies. It doesn't matter how far in history go and how far in the Zamani we go, we were always advanced in culture and continue to advance and shared our advancement. That's the difference between living a communal society versus a non communal society. Right now, we live in a capitalistic society. It's not communal. So it's not indicative of an African experience where, yeah, they didn't have hunger, they didn't have poverty. It's a lot they did not have because they lived as a people. We lived at that moment as a people, and this is the call of the rise of the African. So for us to be a real civilization under God as they were. But one of the things that God blessed them with was the Nile River. Being it going 8,000 miles up and down, so many cities and communities were able to be developed via the Nile. Okay, this is just a recap. So when we start studying African history, you're going to realize that, wait a minute, we had so much more than what they've ever told us about. And we're able to do tons with it. Most of the time when you hear about last 3 weeks, we've been talking about the kingdom of Kush, Nubia. And I never understood, why Nubia, because it was the first major civilization. Even coming after Egypt might have been formed as an entity, but Nubia existed way before Egypt. They were just able to centralize leadership faster in Egypt. But the culture of African living came from Kush, or what we call Nubia. And look at the size of Kush versus Nubia. And so this week we've talked about, man, the Nubian culture. We've talked about Queen Amonarides. Which is, I have a picture of her, the discard queen that went to battle. We talked about King. Oh man, it's King Pop, King Pie. I'm gonna shorten it, right? And I had it before we started. And every time I get here, I get nervous, and I always do that. Painki, King Painki of Nubia. And so we talk about a lot of those things. We talked about the fact that even though they had internal squabbles, it wasn't war for the sake of hatred and negativity. It was war for the sake of growth and development. Growth and development. King Painki was clear when he went to war with Egypt. It wasn't to take over Egypt. It was because Egypt chose was falling off of having a balance of Mayat. Wow, which is the relationship between it. Please, y'all got to show up today at African spirituality class. We're gonna mention, yeah, Egypt today in terms of spirituality. We're not gonna go dive into it, but we'll mention it. And as it seems the way it's going, as we continue in African history, we're slowly catching up. It might be a minute before we start dealing with an African spirituality. I mean, in African spirituality class, we'll start dealing with the culture of Egypt. We might deal with and that'll deal with Kemet and Kush in terms of African spirituality. But we're talking about it today. We're mentioning it, so y'all tune in and just see, because it's important that not only you know the people, but you know the spirit behind the people that created the great cultures. The spirit behind the people, that's important, that created the great cultures. Anybody couldn't have done it. Only a people who were unified in how they viewed themselves in the eyes of the Creator. Period. That's important. And so now we went through there, talked about King Painki and how he conquered Egypt uh, just for the sake of returning Egypt back to its spiritual blessings and spiritual alignment with God. So the Mayat is the relationship man has with man, the relationship man has with the earth, the relationship man has with the deities, and the relationship man has with God. It's all about relationship. And so when King Painki took over Egypt again, and I had a friend we still argue about the mentality of the European invasion and what they left. We're talking about spirits in the next African spirituality class, so y'all be there. So today we want to talk about the army of the king. Now, they never mention in school the power of an African army. Let's talk about that. The power of the African armies. And so we're going to take a look at, and we talked about Queen Amonarines and King Painki. And this is going to focus on the ability that Kush had to go to war. Now, and it's clear we were a giving people, but don't mess with us. We're going to talk about as a people. The Kush Empire was governed by deeply spiritually enlightened individuals who also were willing and ready to go to war on behalf of maintaining and sustaining the Maya. They never really cared to invade other lands for the sake of invading lands. They didn't want it because where they lived, there was a balance of life unto God. Wow. And so inside the curriculum given in the People's Library, there wasn't a discussion of this. As I read, this was something that propelled me to say, I got to look at this more. So let's take a look at the king's army.
Nubian archers hailed from the lands of the southern Nile, which lay far beyond the traditional borders of Egypt. Both of these neighboring civilizations shared long histories that stretch back thousands of years to the very dawn of human history. Each would be molded in its own way by the differences in their respective environments. For instance, closer to its source, the Nile carves its way through hard rock, meandering and crashing over a series of 6 major cataracts. Eventually, however, it begins to straighten out and widen as it finally turns into a wide delta that spills into the Mediterranean. The consequences of this geographic determinism are that the southern lands around Nubia have narrow or non-existent floodplains which make irrigation difficult. Meanwhile, the presence of numerous cataracts greatly impede waterborne travel. Inversely, the northern lands around Egypt have wide floodplains that make agriculture easy, while unbroken north-flowing currents and south-blowing winds make travel luxuriously simple. Such differences would foster the development of 2 diverging yet entwined civilizations with a natural friction point where one environment transitioned to the other.
Now again, we want to always, I welcome Shakesha, one love, thank you. Man, and my baby sister here. Hey, Capucine, how you doing? One love, appreciate you, sister. Look, I need to be coming to visit my nephews. All right, we need to set up a visit when it get warmer. I'm coming. Now, again, we said how God blessed African people with the Nile River. And if you realize how long the Nile River is, and we always say it stretches over 8,000 miles. And so how many communities, societies, and civilizations was existing along that area? And so we saw the map, how small Egypt was and how large Kush or Nubia was. And so these things, they existed at the same time. Some people say, historians say, let's stop that Nubia developed as a group of nomads from around Africa because of the Nile and began to migrate up, as you saw how it widened. They migrated up to the top of Egypt. Now, they never tell you about the lower part of the Nile. They only talked about the Nile as it relates to Egypt. Why? Because then you would have to know about all the other major civilizations. I can't wait till we get into Ethiopia and Somalia and all, all other things in the lower part of Africa. But they couldn't discuss it because you'd have to. You're going to hide that? Because all you hear about is Africa in reference to Egypt, and how only place that was great was Egypt. That was deeply incorrect. That was deeply incorrect. The most oldest civilization is Nubia. Let's continue.
Around the location of the first cataract. At first, both lands would have seen centuries of glacial development. Here, various small communities in primitive social structures, ruled by chieftains, vied for local supremacy. For some time, researchers believed that it was the Egyptian civilization, blessed with more favorable conditions for agriculture and trade, that matured beyond this state more quickly. In support of this claim would be ample evidence which points to the emergence of important early kingdoms in the lands of the north between the 4th and 3rd millennia BC. These in turn would eventually unify under Narmer the first pharaoh of Upper and Lower Egypt, around 3100 BC. However, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and various other modern factors.
I want to repeat that. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. One of the things that I found out doing African spirituality is the fact that a lot of things weren't written down. A lot of things wasn't you couldn't find it. Even in Nubia, the development of hieroglyphics and their own writing developed as well. But there's certain things that just wasn't written, like African spirituality. Just it's hard to find any written works or ancient works other than the hieroglyphics. And we were more oral as a people, meaning telling stories, telling cultures, telling traditions, telling history. We were more oral. But just because it wasn't there, evidence of absence is not absence of evidence doesn't mean evidence of absence. You can see that those families or those communities or those groups of people existed along the Nile River for longer than the existence of Egypt. Egypt was just first to be able to bring the small communities to make one big community. Now that's powerful. A small community. Hey, I see you got your grandbabies watching. Hey, grandbabies, Shakeshia's grandbabies. We want to make sure we learn about who we are and where we come from and how powerful we are. We're going to talk about the king's army in Nubia. Let's continue.
Have limited our understanding of the Neolithic period of Sudan. Exciting studies from the last few decades have revealed that the people of Nubia were in fact quite capable of keeping up with their northern neighbors, and produced several important pre-dynastic kingdoms with complex societies and wide connections to the outside world. Unfortunately, flooding caused by the Aswan Dam and a poor state of preservation in the region have done much to keep us from learning more about these groups. By the 2500s BC, though, our shrouded vision of the past begins to clear with the ascension of the Kingdom of Kerma. This rising power began as an important urban center that dominated the area surrounding the Third Cataract. Eventually, it gained control of the vast lands extending from the First to the Fourth Cataracts, thus rivaling the size of its contemporary rulers to the north. Within its borders lay a multitude of different tribes and peoples with their own particular ethnicities, cultures, religions, and dialects. Yet this was no apparent obstacle. The Kingdom of Kerma appears to have been a highly centralized state, which drew wealth from its lands, namely agriculture, pastoralism, animal products, mineral processing, and trade with the African interior. It leveraged these resources for the construction of new monumental architecture, the expansion of important irrigation projects, and the advancement of sophisticated metallurgical practices.
Need you to listen to what they were able to create in that area, in that culture. All right, so they had irrigation, they had metal trading and developing. It said they had communication outside of the country itself, meaning other civilizations in elsewhere. They also traded with deeper communities and people deeper in Africa. So this was a major hub, a major location. Why? Because of the Nile. The God blessed Africans with the Nile, and Africans were able to share communal living, share with one another. You ever sit down and you interacting with, you got brothers and sisters and all y'all playing and somebody won't share? Guess what? That's not African. That's not African. That's European behavior. Why? Because Africans shared the resources, because Africa had a lot to share. Nobody went hungry. Nobody would need it. And they were able to develop, and he said it, an advanced civilization. Kush. So when you speak of Egypt, Kush came first. Let's continue.
At the same time, its military also evolved into a formidable army of skirmishers, footmen, cavalry, chariots, and war elephants, which clashed frequently with their neighbors. It is as a result of these battles that we first hear of the infamous Nubian Archers. Let us now review what these would have looked like. We can start to get a sense of this from numerous artistic depictions and written descriptions recorded by both the Nubians themselves and their neighbors, who came to know them quite well. In terms of physical appearance, they are shown as being of dark skin with tall, muscled bodies. Herodotus indicates that for battle, some among them painted their bodies half with chalk and half with vermilion. Often they can be seen wearing skirts accented with animal pelts and other forms of prideful ornamentation. Their heads, for instance, often sported distinctive hairstyles with additional plumage to make them stand out even further. But what makes these imposing figures even more impressive are the massive bows they carried with them. These were self-bows, made from a single piece of wood which measured anywhere from around 1.5 to 2 meters in length, approximately the same size as the later English longbow. However, where it differs is that the Nubian longbow features reflexed tips which bend away from the archer when the weapon is unstrung. This likely would have been done using steam in order to improve the bow's performance when drawn and increase its power. Another interesting feature of such bows is that they do not appear to have used notches for securing the bowstring at its ends. This seems to have been done so as not to weaken the bow under high stress. Instead, the bowstring would have been secured by way of tied leather bindings. Self-bows of such size would typically be drawn to a length of around 60 to 70 centimeters. This meant that an optimal arrow would have a shaft just slightly longer than that amount. These projectiles would be made of seasoned palm wood, reed, or sturdy cane that was further smoothed out and may have been painted red or black. Their tails featured feather fletchings attached with an adhesive along with a knock end. Meanwhile, their points were capped by a variety of arrowhead forms. Herodotus states that these were made of stone, but we have evidence of bone, ivory, and iron tips as well.
Bone, ivory, and iron tips. It's like multiple different types of knives. Weaponry. Then they said, wait. They said they had a cavalry. They had war elephants. Footmen, cavalry, and war elephants. Cavalry, I guess those are people on horses. The footmen are the people, the soldiers that fight. That's the Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Marines, because they did have a sea people. That's wow. Where do we think we got it from, right? And so they said they were just massive looking Afrocentric men, that their presence alone was intimidating. And so when we take a look at Africans and we see the chalk on that we paint our faces, that's it come in two different ways, because that could also be spiritual, as they walking into the spiritual realm, or is completely intimidating when it comes to warfare. Right? So if you look at football players, how they put the little mask on under their eyes, what's that for? It's just intimidation. That's all it is. It's intimidation. When you look in my eyes, I want to make you get nervous so that you're not at your best. And they said these archers, just the presence of them made everybody a little nervous, a little bit more nervous. Let's keep looking.
Basic versions came in a triangular point, while others had longer stems and might include sets of barbs. By some accounts, these arrowheads may have even been poisoned. Some researchers have been able to lend credence to this idea by running tests on residue found on ancient Egyptian arrowheads, which reveal some level of surviving toxicity. Interestingly, several carvings and statues depict Nubian archers walking proudly to war with arrows in hand. However, other evidence reassures us that they did indeed make use of quivers. Several of these from later periods have actually survived. Normally made of rawhide and tanned leather, they are elaborately decorated with many embossings, adornments, and streamers. Most examples appear to have been worn at the side, but some, like this tube-shaped design, were likely slung across one's back. Other specialty gear employed by these archers included bracelets and rings. Bracelets were worn on one's bow arm to protect the skin from the recoil of the bowstring. One surviving example seems to have had a paired thumb cover, which has led researchers to believe Nubians rested their arrows on their thumbs, holding it on the right side of the grip, which is opposite of the technique commonly used by contemporary European bowmen. Archer rings also helped with using a bow and arrow and are frequently found in Nubian archaeological sites. They may have been used as a rest for the arrow alongside the riser, or helped serve as a convenient hook for drawing the bowstring. In addition, these Nubian archers probably carried an array of other weaponry. Daggers would have been a must given their general utility, but for more offensive punch in close quarters, a warrior could also wield something like the shotel-style sword. Based on other carvings, they might also have wielded axes and clubs when the situation demanded. As for the secrets of how these Nubian archers trained, we sadly have little information to go on. Likely, most of their techniques would have been a matter of built-up generational knowledge, with specific skills being honed through constant repetition. Hunting, in particular, must have played a huge part in the history of Nubian archery. Their lands were rich with all manner of wild game that could.
I wanna continue I wanna stop for a quick second. One, they talk to you about the skillfulness of the archer, the detailed equipment that they had to carry. Now, as they talk about hunting, this was a part of life. And so I believe, personally believe, when you take a look at it, that's a part of rites of passage. In certain African cultures, young men could not be considered men if you couldn't hunt. And so developing the archer was important. Why? Because you can hunt your lion. You got your, hey, hunt son, bring home a lion. You can hunt a lion from a distance. You can hunt a bear from a distance. You look at him, he's hunting buffalo. I guess that's a wildebeest from a distance. That's why archers was so key. Because that hand-to-hand combat is one thing. You fighting somebody, you punching them, hitting them. But being able to stand miles away and be accurate, that's a whole different story. And then when you talked about what they used when they came in, the stuff that they had to use when they come in terms of other equipment that they carried, right? But all of this to get to that point, and this is why it's important in our communities that we adopt that rites of passage. Hunting was a part of it. But when you learn how to shoot a bow and arrow, what are you scared of? You've been trained already. Let's continue.
Be hunted for sustenance, sport, trade, or tribute. This was certainly true in northern Egypt, where we routinely hear of the exploitation of such wildlife. Nobles, in particular, were known to ride out on horse or on chariot to take on particularly large animals. Perhaps the elite of the Nubian archers similarly competed to take down the most prized trophies. It seems likely that additional practice also occurred back in the major urban centers. Here, the walls of temples and palaces are studded with glorious depictions of various leaders and their bows. Perhaps this was similar to the wrestling competitions we see Nubians participating in on several Egyptian wall paintings. It's not difficult to imagine, therefore, that prominent figures were keen to show off their skill with the bow as a symbol of status. This was certainly the case with Nubian rulers who flexed that might before foreigners who visited their lands. For instance, when spies of Cambyses were discovered in the realm, the king of Nubia brought them before him and said, quote, "When the Persians can draw a bow of this greatness as easily as I do, only then should they bring overwhelming odds to attack the long-lived Ethiopians."
Ooh. Bragging rights. Again, they understood the skill set that they had at being able to protect their culture, protect their way of life, protect their traditions. That is a part of living. Being able to protect what you feel God has given to you. And so when the Persians came to visit, because people came to try to take over what God blessed them with, which is the area of the Nile and the trade, and we'll get into that. But before you get to the part where the reason why Europeans and everybody else began to attack Africa, you had to understand that Africa knew the value of their lands. They knew the value of their relationship to God. They knew their value of the relationship to each other. They knew the value of relationship to the nature. And they said, we have to be able to protect this. And so we said, we're not scared of somebody coming to take what we have. Why? Because they're not better at what we do when it comes to protecting what's ours. And so that's bragging rights right there. And then they said, if you notice, because they knew that they were better than these other armies, they didn't go take over the other lands. And you'll see it as it comes, because they didn't care to. It wasn't a part of African culture to conquer just for the sake of conquering. That didn't exist. Let's continue.
But till then, they should thank the gods for not giving the sons of the Ethiopians a mind to win more territory than they currently have. Can draw a bow of this greatness as easily as I do. Only then should they bring overwhelming odds to attack the long-lived Ethiopians. But till then, they should thank the gods for not giving the sons of the Ethiopians a mind to win more territory than they currently have.
They said, all those who try to come after us should thank the gods for not giving us the mindset to take over more land than what we have. We don't want what you have. God has blessed us enough. So let us, we take it and we'll share it, because they were trading, and we will trade willingly. We don't want what you have. You keep what you got, and we'll trade. That's communal living. In the Bible, it says, give as you are able and take as you have need. Don't take. That's not it. That's not communal living. Africans had an understanding with God and nature. You don't need to be, and this is our issue of having more. We have people who have way more than what they need, and they share it not. That has to change. We have to develop a generation that understands that if God blesses you with more, then he should also bless you with a heart to share, yet a mind to maintain what you have. Let's continue.
When it came time to fight, each individual warrior would have to be slotted into the organization of the Nubian military. Once again, though, we lack any real understanding of what this looked like. Based on general principles of how tribal forces assemble, though, it seems reasonable to assume that they assembled locally under village chiefs, who in turn pooled their might on the level of the clan, then tribe, then kingdom. Given our lack of any specifics, it is tempting to brush off the organization of Nubian forces as being simple or primitive. Yet, this was certainly not the case. As we stated before, the rulers of Nubia ran a quite centralized and militarized state, which often brought its great resources to bear when it came to war-making. Constant fighting in and of itself forced them to adapt to survive, but they also had frequent exposure to the inner workings of the Egyptian army, as mercenaries over the centuries and even as commanders during the 25th dynasty. Meanwhile, their service in other armies, like that of the Achaemenids and Ptolemies, ensured that the Nubians remained well versed in the military affairs of their day. A similar conversation can be had when it comes to the tactics of the Nubian archers. We know little for sure, but can be quite confident that they were sophisticated and effective. The first thing to point out is that they seldom functioned alone. Nubian armies were mixed forces that fielded units of spearmen, axemen, swordsmen, cavalry, chariots, and even elephants. If they followed the traditional Egyptian model, then massed blocks of archers would be used to soften up the enemy, while mobile forces worked the flanks, and the center prepared to unleash a decisive charge to finish the job. This matches the description given to us by Diodorus Siculus, who states, quote, "After their arrows are exhausted, they finish the fight with wooden clubs."
Now, we want to talk about. I'm sorry because I'm writing notes too. I educate me as I educate you. I am the Malakio. So are you. Yes. Now, in this space where we're talking about, they said they were respected and hired out hands. Kingdoms around the globe would say, hey, Nubia, Kush, we need your help. Can we have your archers come and help us fight our battles? That's when you know how good you are, when someone has to come to you and say, can you please help me? And then you saw the development of the West things, where you said the village, the clan, the tribe, and then to a kingdom. So we weren't, again, going to war for the sake of just going to war. We were building larger families. And we were respected by those who saw. Let us continue.
But it wasn't just in pitched battles that the Nubian archers proved useful. As light troops, they could advance quickly over terrain to act as raiders, conducting hit-and-run tactics or ambushes against enemy detachments or slow-moving forces. They also proved incredibly useful in fights over the many formidable fortifications which sprung up along the Nile. Here is one particularly evocative description of what the Achaemenids encountered when they ventured into the land of the bow. So from the battlements, as though on the walls of a citadel, the archers kept up with a continual discharge of well-aimed shafts, so dense that the Persians had the sensation of a cloud descending upon them, especially when the Kushites made their enemies' eyes the targets. So unerring was their aim that those whom they pierced with their shafts rushed about wildly in the throngs with the arrows projecting from their eyes like double flutes. When it comes to the full...
Wait a minute. I had to stop there. They said that they were so good. Of course, you see how, I don't know if y'all have ever watched certain movies where you see the archers go first. Archers can go first because, yeah, we can hit you without even being there. We can fight you without even hurting you. So we're gonna shoot these arrows, and then it's not just shooting arrows. The precision of the arrow. So what I want you to think about is when you're next in the car and you see the longest distance, somebody taking an arrow and shooting it in your eye. And now if you listen to it, these are the tales of the civilizations who tried to take over Nubia. Now you're coming into my land trying to take my resources and my culture, my tradition, my heritage. That's not happening. Why? Because of the Nile River. They all wanted to control the trade. Nubia said, we'll share it with you, man. Stop playing. No, we want to take it. Stop. Just trade with us. No, we want to take it. Yeah, this is serious. To be able to shoot out somebody's eye from a distance. They said, man, it was just... And then they said it was like a cloud coming down. And I don't know if you're old enough to watch the movie 300. And they said the arrows will come like a... And they weren't just shooting them in the air. They were aiming, literally aiming. Some people just shoot, dude, no, but they look at you and they're like, okay, I'm gonna hit this dude right there. I'm gonna hit this dude right there. Y'all watched uh, uh, the Avengers? Y'all see Hawkeye? So imagine hundreds of Hawkeyes shooting, hitting people without even looking because of your peripheral vision. What are you doing? Shoot, timing. People running towards you, timing. Yeah, this was a different being. The king's army is what we're studying today in Kush. Woo! very powerful, powerful African warriors. Are you an African warrior? Let's keep listening.
Service history of the Nubian Archers, there is much we could potentially cover, as they saw action for literally thousands of years. For the sake of this video, we can break things out into each major period with some highlights. The first period would have been that of the Kingdom of Kerma, which we previously mentioned. It lasted from around 2500 BC to 1500 BC. The early years were likely characterized by much Nubian on Nubian infighting as the final embers of resistance were stamped out. Once unified, however, the famed African longbowmen could turn their attention outwards. This meant constantly being on guard against the desert tribes that preyed upon their herds and trade routes. Other times, it meant selling their services in the employ of other armies. Under a strong leader, however, the Nubians would be marshaled with a greater purpose to raid the lands of Upper Egypt. During this period, various inscriptions speak of massive invasions pouring out of the south, which prompted pharaohs of the Old and Middle Kingdom to start fortifying the entire area around the First Cataract. Though many of these defenses, like the W.O.A fortress, appear impregnable, records indicate they were stormed repeatedly by Nubian troops. The peerless aim of the archers in particular must have been crucial in clearing the walls for such assaults. However, the ascendancy of New Kingdom Egypt in the 1500s BC would see the northern civilization at its peak, with little that could stand in its way. As a result, much of the Kingdom of Kerma would be conquered and assimilated. For the Nubian Archers, however, this did not mean an end to the fighting. Instead, they would now be fully absorbed into the Egyptian military, their rank and file often serving abroad, and their officers frequently rising to positions of high power. Sometimes, however, rebellions would flare up with Nubian arrows once again finding their way into Egyptian skulls. This was particularly true around the 1100s BC, when the new kingdom fell into terminal decline. As it collapsed, the Nubians would rise from the ruins to rebuild their own kingdom, centered around Napata. This new power proved even more successful than its predecessor.
What we want to remember, and if you can remember these from the other African history videos and conversations that we had about Kush, was the fact that Kush kept going to invade Egypt, not because they wanted to invade Egypt, but because Egypt could not hold their own borders with the Persians and the Greek trying to invade Egypt. So Kush, for years upon years, would sit down and say, no, we're not coming to help Egypt. We need to take it over, because for some reason the leadership in Egypt is too weak to hold the borders, because if Egypt falls, Kush is next. So if Greek and Persian and all these alien invaders take over Egypt, they're going to come down and try to take over us. And that's why you will see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years where the pharaohs of Egypt came from Nubia. I didn't know that till I started studying African history. I didn't know it. They teach you about Egypt, but they never teach you about Kush. Why? Because they don't want you to know the fact that Africans, black folk, we brought the world everything. It was the first, and even if you remember the videos from previous weeks, Greece and Rome and all of them said, this civilization is older than we can even imagine. And that's the reason why of war. We don't go to war as a people just because we go to war. We go to war because we're trying to sustain and maintain something. Those local skirmishes that they talk about wasn't, I'm going to beat you up just because I'm going to beat you up. No, we need to become a family. We need to be connected. We need to grow. We need to develop. Because I have fish. You got cattle. Together we got fish and cattle. He got wheat. Fish, cattle, wheat. Right? Now look, let's get these trade deals. Now we can create stores. We can get rid of hunger. No, you don't need to be a tribal individual. You want to be a kingdom. Why? Because within that kingdom, we can control the economic development of our community and make sure that everybody has. Now they said that some things was destroyed. History was destroyed by the floods. That flood came from a dam that's out of Ethiopia, which is Sudan, over by, if you look down at the bottom of the map, down there by Zimbabwe. There's a dam there that, yeah, erupted and flooded and took away all the history. Right? I could do some more research on that. But it was clear, as you see the skirmishes over the years was based off the fact that Egypt could not hold their borders. And Kush was like, look, man, y'all are up there, just, and then we believe almost the same thing. Yo, hold it down. They couldn't do it. And so that's where you get the fight between Kush and Egypt on a regular basis. Let's continue.
By the 750s BC, Nubian archers were once again on the offensive, pushing as far as Thebes and under King Pia, seizing the entirety of Egypt. For nearly a century, the Nubians ruled as the legitimate and powerful 25th dynasty. Together with the Egyptians, they fought many bloody battles against their neighbors, like the newly ascendant Neo-Assyrians. Several surviving inscriptions portray the vicious sieges waged between these combatants. Ultimately, however, the pressure from the east proved too much, and the Nubian rulers pulled back to their southern heartland. Yet more fighting ensued as a resurgent Egypt now pursued them, sacking the capital of Napata in 592 BC. As a result, King Aspelta would move his administrative center to the more southern city of Meroe. From here, the Nubians would rebuild themselves and quickly regain their strength. When the Achaemenid Empire conquered Egypt in 525 BC, they next attempted to invade Nubia. The result was a disaster, caused by the staunchness of the defenders and the fortuitous arrival of a sandstorm that swallowed vast portions of the enemy army. In the aftermath, a tenuous peace was established, which saw Nubian soldiers supplied to the Royal Achaemenid army. Numerous sources point to these serving as far away as Greece in the Persian Wars. Over the following centuries, the kingdom of Meroe would go on to evolve in ever more fascinating ways. For example, efforts to fight back against entrenched northern influence saw King Ergomenes massacre the priests of Amun at Napata and relocate the royal tombs to the south. Meanwhile, there was a greater mixing with the surrounding sub-Saharan cultures of the region, along with new imports from the Hellenic world, like Greek philosophy that accompanied the arrival of the Ptolemaic dynasty. We have no records of major Nubian wars in this era, but it is sure that there would have been the usual border skirmishes and tug-of-war taking place around the region of the First Cataract. The next conflict of note would occur in 25 BC, when the Nubians launched an invasion against the newly minted province of Roman Egypt. This, in turn, would be met with a counter-invasion that saw a series of pitched battles and sieges culminate in a standoff by the fortress of Premnis.
You got to see that. We talked about that. That's Queen of Monarines, the one with the eye. They talked now again. If you watching this and you've seen it in previous times, how all the people outside of Egypt and Nubia tried to take over this area for the sake of the Nile. It had some of the richest areas there: gold, ore, iron, you name it, the food, the cattle. It was just rich in life, and everybody around it needed to take it. And if you see how Nubia was, look, we're not fighting you just because we want to take over you. Like you said, he said, we came back, we take it over, and then we back out. Why did they leave? Because we want you to just follow the Maya. We're trying to push foreign invasion out. Queen Amonarines, when Rome came in, I'm fighting Rome. And they talk about this, sister. We talked about it before in the last week before last. The sisters. And so Nubia had a matriarchic understanding that if a black woman was strong enough to lead, then she can lead. Of course, they were strong enough to fight. Now, we also talk about it in AfriStream. If you watch this during AfriStream, which individuals, where Rwanda, 60% of the parliament are black women. Why? Because in the Rwanda struggle to become Rwanda now, which is about to be the next Singapore, right? Rwanda about to be the next Singapore of African continent, which is not too far from the middle over there in the center. I think that's over there, Zambia, a little up a little bit more. Um, we They said that they are again fighting to be the best that they can. We're trying to make sure that what we have stays ours. And if a woman can help us get there, we can get there. So in Rwanda, they said, yeah, she could lead. In Nubia, exactly the same thing. That's how old it is. It is European to believe that black women can't fight and black women can't lead. That's European. That's definitely not African. She actually, Queen of Monterina's, if y'all remember the last story, defeated Greece. And they wrote stories in Greece about how great she was. And also in Nubia, we also said the kings. Well, we talk about the king's army because at one point it was the queen's army. But understand what she had, what she went. As fierce as the archers were, so was the fierceness of her sword. Woo! Or their sword, because it was to be royal, is to also to be able to do battle. We're almost at the end.
We cover this conflict in greater detail in another video which you can check out. But once the dust had settled, life along the Nile returned to the usual balance of power that had existed for millennia between north and south. This would last until the 3rd century AD, when the kingdom of Kush would be weakened by internal rebellion and eventually invaded by the rising power of Aksum. Yet even after this occurred, archers of the Nubian territories would continue to fight on for centuries. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the history of the Nubian Archers and their incredible civilization. Let us know what unit of history you would like to see us cover next.
The king's army, the queen's army, the civilization of Kush, Nubia, its greatness, its need not to go to war for the sake of going to war, but for the sake of balance of spiritual focus. That's the reasons. Those are the only reasons why they would go to war, because Egypt was being always sought upon, and they said, if you was listening to the other stories, Egypt was just the immigrants from Kush who migrated up and developed a new civilization. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it. You can find yourselves in the pages of history. Know that what you are descendants of real warriors. What is sacred to go to war for is your tradition, your culture, your heritage, your way of life as you see it in the sight of God. Not for greed, not for money, not for riches. When you conquer your world around you, conquer it because you seek to experience who you are in the Creator. Do nothing for money, everything in honor to God, and God will make sure that you stay wealthy. With that being said, I'll see you in African Spirituality class. Hopefully you enjoyed this moment in African history and roots and culture. One love.